Hello and welcome to our next podcast. I believe it's podcast 7. My name's Charley and I'm here with my good friend Ken Behrens, and we are naturally adventurous. We are going to finish off our top 10 birding experiences. You'd think 20 birds would be quicker than a month and a half, but that's how long.
It's been a much longer journey than anticipated, but it's been enjoyable. I've got some great stories I never heard from you before, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's been quite a ride. Anyway, but before we get into Ken's top 3, just a little bit of news. We've been telling you about our online school of birding, and that is pretty much ready to go live. So that website should be up and running by Monday. We've been working really hard on this, and we're pretty happy with the results. So please check us out at schoolofbirding.com from Monday onwards.
And I'll go ahead and tell folks just a little bit about the first tutorial that I'm offering. It's how to prepare for a birding trip. As you can tell from this podcast, I've been traveling almost my whole life and basically always getting ready for / cramming for the next birding trip. This tutorial basically includes all the little tricks and techniques I've learned through the years to get ready for a birding trip. But it's for everybody from like a person taking their first bird tour ever to like a hardcore independent traveler. There's different levels at which you can study. And yours is about listing, right, Charlie? eBird and so on?
Yep, that's right. I'm a pretty rabid world lister for birds. Ken knows that very well. He piggybacks off my list sometimes.
Well, you're the yin to my listing yang. I'm really not a lister, although I'm a lazy e-birder, and so when Charlie will copy me on a checklist, I'll list those.
He'll go as far as to click accept, and then that's about it. Anyway, I've slowly got more and more into listing over the years. I've spent a lot of time organizing my word list, and I've got quite a bit of expertise in how to build a list and how to put in all your historical data from all your trips and checklists and field guides. So I'm really the person to give you ideas on how you can start putting your bird list together. And then also I'm going to show people in my tutorial a lot of cool ways that you can use that database that you put together. You can use it for planning trips and for finding birds, and there's some pretty powerful tools involved in that. So I'm pretty excited to show people my bird listing tutorial. And we should mention maybe our good friend Andres as well. He's doing a Photoshop tutorial.
Yep,
I believe
that's right. And then a couple other folks will be adding tutorials later, but we're going to launch with those 3 on Monday.
Yep. So we did our virtual tours for many months, but this is a little bit more skill based. So you're going to be actually learning skills by watching these. Okay, so we're going to get into it. We're going to finish off Ken's, hopefully, if the stories are not too long. We're going to get into Ken's top 3 lifetime sightings, and we're going to be doing this in reverse order as usual. And we're going to start off with Ken's number 3, which he's going to have to do some convincing for me, because it's it is Scotus in New Jersey. So doesn't do a lot for me. The title doesn't do a lot for me, but I'm sure there's some.
Well, let's see if I can change your mind. There's definitely quite a bit of background story to this one, and it's actually a good chance to talk about the difference between different kinds of birding. What most folks do when they bird is they tend to bird a local area, local patch, or even maybe their backyard. It's much more of a local thing than what you and I do, where we're traveling all around the world, constantly looking for new things or trying to show people as many birds as possible in a given country, that sort of thing, or chasing endemics. That's actually very different than typical birding. So this one on my top 10 is much more of a normal birding story, in that it's about birding the same place over and over again and then seeing something incredible. So migration counting is something that goes pretty far back in Europe, in places like Falsterbo. I guess hawk watching really took off in the US in probably the 70s, hawk watching and hawk counting, where you sit on a ridge line or at a peninsula and you count the migrating raptors every day, especially during fall migration. Sea watching is something that started, I think, quite a while ago in Europe, but much more recently in the United States. So there's a famous hawk watch in Cape May, New Jersey. And basically, as people were birding Cape May and getting to know Cape May, they realized there was a major waterbird migration along the shore there, the Atlantic as well. And then in 1995, the Cape May Bird Observatory started a waterbird count in Avalon, New Jersey, which is just a little bit north of Cape May. So it's sort of a coastal resort town, lots of big fancy houses and that sort of thing. But it's just at the perfect point where the coast sticks out about a mile into the ocean. So all these birds that are migrating south along that very straight New Jersey Atlantic shore kind of hit this big sort of a headland and then come much closer to shore at Avalon. So it's the perfect place to see them a bit closer and to count them. So people have been doing this since 1995. I counted the waterbird count on and off for a couple of years in the mid-2000s. I was the full-time counter one year, and I was the swing counter another year, where I did both the hawk count and the waterbird count. So when you do this sort of job, a migration count, you live with this sense of history, because you have all these years of numbers accumulated. And then, you have legendary past counters. You hear about, do you remember the day that this guy had 2,000 tundra swans? Or have you heard about the 25,000 red-throated loon day back in 1999? You're constantly kind of comparing the year you're counting with history. So there's a sense of history. It's a weird job, because there's a lot of boredom in a sense. There's a lot of sitting there and there's not a lot happening. There's some very quiet days with very few birds migrating, but there's also just this sense of like anything could happen anytime. So a rare bird could fly by, or just a huge migration. And traditionally, the high point of every season at Avalon, so you're there for 3 months, but there's normally a big day.
Really?
Yeah, 3 months, standing there all day, every day next to the ocean. So, and that's normally about 10 hours. So that's a lot of hours standing on a seawall next to the Atlantic and, scanning with binoculars, basically. Every year, the high point pretty much is what people always call the big day. And this is it's the high day of the season's migration. And you normally get sort of 60 to 80,000 scoters flying by on that day. Now, one year, there seemed like there
What species of scoters are these?
It's all three of the American scoters, so black, surf, and white-winged, but mostly surf and black. Much smaller numbers of white-winged, but the surf and the black mix up pretty freely.
Did they not split black and common?
That's right. Yeah. So common scoter is now a different species, the European common scoter.
Right.
And I think in velvet scoter is also a separate, the European white-winged scoter.
White-winged, yeah.
Yeah. So this big day normally happens in late October. So there's always this mounting sense of excitement. You've been through some very, very boring days in sort of late September when a few common terns fly by and very little's happening, but you're kind of dreaming of this big day. The big day is coming. And you wake up in the morning and you're kind of groggy, but you're thinking, this might be the big day.
Might be today.
It's such a different kind of birding than this kind of shooting around the world. You're just standing there and waiting for something to happen. Oh, to give a little context, you normally count about 800,000 birds in 3 months of standing there. And the big day is normally 70 or 80,000 birds. So you're getting 10% of the whole season's birds in one day. So it's a huge proportion, and it's just incredibly exciting. The way scoters fly, they're like manic. They feel, the way they fly, it's like they can barely keep in the air. They're beating their wings as fast as they can. They are quite fast, objectively fast, and they form these big swirling flocks.
Right.
It's almost like an amoeba or something. It's like this macroorganism that's kind of like billowing and swirling, and that there's this like manic energy when these things are on their way south. You feel like they want to get south as fast as they possibly can. And so it's exciting to see a flock of scoters migrating anytime, even if it's 200 birds. You can imagine when you're seeing tens of thousands in a day, when you're seeing flocks of thousands of scoters just kind of billowing and flying south. It's very exciting. And so you're waiting for the big day, and basically, it was actually October 26th, 2007. It was right about the time when the big day normally happens. So I was ready.
Uh-huh.
But what happened was the biggest big day ever in the history of the Avalon Sea Watch. Instead of the normal 70 to 80,000 birds, there was about 150,000 birds that flew south that day. And it was almost perfectly divided between surf and black scoters. It was mind-blowing. I mean, after personally having put in hundreds and hundreds of hours standing there, and I think this was maybe my second or third year in Cape May, to suddenly see something that was twice any historical counts. And for a little historical context, this was, the count had gone back to 1995. So this was the 13th year of the count. People had put in around 9,000 hours of standing there and watching for migrating birds. And to see something that was just so, twice the magnitude of any previous migration was really, really special. And it was just an overwhelmingly powerful migratory spectacle. And the historical significance just added to how special it was. It was also...
Had it been quite quiet up until that point? I mean, was it just sort of they were delayed and then they all just kind of came through at once, or what caused that?
Nobody was ever sure. It definitely seemed the numbers were a bit depressed until that point, and then you had the feeling that something happened with maybe the weather in the Arctic or something that just released all these birds. But we never really knew for sure why this happened, and it hasn't happened since. Since then, it's never been. No one's even come close. I don't think anyone's cracked 100,000 in a day since then.
There must be some sort of estimation involved here. I mean, if you can't, either some like really big flocks you see that you've got to think, oh, that's about 100 birds or 200 birds or whatever, because you can't count every single individual.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of what's so exhausting, taxing, and exciting about it, is that not only are you're trying to quantify overall, but you're also trying to separate the two main species, surf scoter and black scoter.
Right.
And you're trying to pick out other things. So these scoter flocks are like the sort of the freight trains that run down the East Coast, and a lot of other ducks kind of join in. They follow in the wake of the strong flying scoters, and then they don't have to flap their wings as hard to sort of cover the same ground.
Yeah.
And so it's like this train that other things jump on. And so you're getting things like bufflehead and even razorbill and wood ducks and all kinds of stuff mixed in. So not only are there 150,000 birds flying by in a day, you're having to scrutinize every single one and try to figure out what it is. Now, there's lots of estimation. And so at the Avalon Sea Watch, you have banks of clickers that are assigned to the different species. And for the big ones, like the scoters, you actually have 1, 10, and 100 multiples. So you basically, as one of these flocks is bearing down on you, you just have to decide like in which multiple you're going to estimate it. And then you're kind of counting it by blocks. And then you also, at the same time, you have to try to figure out the breakdown between, say, surf and black scoters, and then record that. But you can just imagine, flock after flock after flock is bearing down on you over a sort of a 10-hour day, and you're having to break down, identify them, estimate them. It's exhausting and exhilarating. I mean, it was a cold day. It sort of drizzled rain all day. So you're standing out there in the drizzling rain, and there's sort of low clouds. It's just this gloomy day, but then you just feel this like power of migration just surging down the East Coast. It's hard to describe, and it's a totally different kind of birding than sort of like some of what we've talked about, going into a forest and finding some rare endemic bird. In some sense, instead of you being the active one, you're the passive one. You're sitting there and you're just beholding this spectacle and the power of nature and migration. And the sort of the bad weather just added to the feeling of that epic day.
I would say sea watching is one of my least favorite types of birding. and I've got a good friend at home back in the UK, and I always go and see him, and he says, yeah, there's some interesting birds on the coast. And I went to the coast, and we're standing there on this cliff with this icy wind and just rain and clouds, just sort of scoping these little dots in the distance. And we were there for hours. And at the end of it, my friend was like, "Oh, that was fantastic," and I'm like, I just looked at him. I thought, what are you talking about? But it's actually quite a popular form of birding in the UK. British
in the
birders
UK,
are
yeah.
actually they're quite into this sort of migration birding and scanning on the coast and stuff like that. But I must say I have had a few days of sea birding of coastal birding that's been fun, but. Yeah, no, it sounds amazing. Those huge numbers. I always get really nervous if I'm asked to estimate something because there's a real skill in it. Eh? I mean,
there is. Yeah.
I wouldn't say I always just don't feel very confident in my estimation. You know that effect where you don't say if you tell somebody how many you think there are, that affects their estimate quite
absolutely.
Quite strongly. Yeah?
Yep.
And it's often like I'll be looking at this flock. And I'm thinking maybe there's 100 birds there, and then somebody will say, "Oh, there's 1,000," and I'll say, "Oh, yeah, I was thinking maybe 500." You'll up it, so you don't sort of look stupid, But I guess with your clickers, that you're getting your real estimate without being biased by other people.
That's right. You're not scrutinized, so that's one thing. You start with very few birds and you sort of build up your confidence. Obviously, after a couple years of doing it, you get some confidence. One other little detail I'll mention is that, so we have both hand clickers and then we have banks of clickers. And so the way we count is like I'll have 5 clickers on my hands. So I'm basically looking, we have these really cool Zeiss like image stabilized binoculars that are just one of the coolest pieces of kit. I think they were designed for like naval use. But so you're basically holding these things with your hands, and meanwhile your hands are like covered in all this clicker bling. And then as you're scanning through these flocks, you're like clicking, and then you have to remember.
But the clickers are for different. The clickers are for different species, or what?
Different species or different multiples. I might have on a day like this, I probably had a 10 and 100 surf scoter clicker, a 10 and 100 black scoter, and then probably also at least a 10 darkwing scoter, like if I didn't manage to identify some.
Right.
And so as these things are flying, you're like click, 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 you're clicking them with your hands as you're looking through the binoculars. Then you have to remember what each one of those clickers is and transfer those onto your big banks.
How do you know which clicker is which? You have them all labeled or little pictures on there? Or?
You have to remember. And so that, it's just, it requires a lot of focus because your numbers can just go wacko if let's say you thought it was a 10 clicker, but then you confused it and then you called it a 100 clicker. Suddenly your numbers are like an order of magnitude out. So, yep, there's certainly lots of scope for messing things up. And so you really have to stay focused and keep your cool. It's a very different kind of birding. It's like a physical and mental grind. It just takes a lot of focus. Yeah. I love it. In defense of sea watching, I'm probably a bit biased since I wrote a guide to sea watching, it's about Eastern North American waterbirds in flight. It was the Peterson reference series, was published by Houghton Mifflin a few years ago. Basically, while doing this unusual job of counting the sea watch, my friend Cameron Cox and I realized we were using a lot of ID techniques that no one had ever really published or talked about. And so we put these all into a guide, which is basically about how to learn to identify waterbirds in flight, how to use some of these sort of cutting edge techniques. So I'm a bit partial to sea watching. I'll say especially US East Coast sea watching is pretty different than the British thing of like staring through a scope at Manx shearwaters or something. These scoter days, they are just exciting. I mean, I think any birder would love a good scoter migration. If you have like a nice sunny day, surf scoters and black scoters, they have these like colored knobs above their bills, and they have these bright, like black scoter has a bright orange bill, like glossy kind of blackish plumage. Like they're really attractive birds, and in nice light, it's just a gorgeous spectacle. And they're often quite close to shore as well. Like some of these things, you don't even need a scope to see them. They're flying right down the beach. Right. So it's not this esoteric thing that you have to be some kind of masochist to enjoy.
Yeah, I do actually like scoters a little bit. I see them in Japan every year, and they sort of you get them off these really incredibly cold, in the very far north of Japan, in Hokkaido, and they often come into the little fishing ports to shelter, and they do all these cool little whistling calls, and they're very cute, and they're kind of social, all in a little group. They are quite charming birds. I actually saw once the magnificent Stella's sea eagle taking a black scoter.
Oh wow!
It was, well, actually, the eagle was perched on the snow, and then it had something in its talons, and it flew off. And I got a picture, and then we saw later that it was a scoter.
Wow,
that's a great. It sounds like an amazing experience. Something I'd like to check out one year. But I think we'll move on. So sea watching from the coast is probably my second least favorite type of birding. My overall least favorite type of birding is pelagic birding.
There's a theme developing here.
We'll move on to your number 2, which is black-browed albatross in South Africa.
Yeah, black-browed albatross. So we had an episode where we talked about both moving to South Africa at different times. The oceans off of Cape Town, South Africa, and the Cape Peninsula, one of the best places in the world for pelagic birding. Certainly places that are close to shore. You have really cold currents coming up from the South Atlantic, from Antarctica, that bring a lot of nutrients, food, and they basically bring tons and tons of pelagic birds with them. And they come right up to just off of Cape Point. So when I moved there, I knew about this, and I was very keen to take a pelagic birding trip and to see some of these amazing birds. The problem with the southern oceans there is that they're very tempestuous. Lots of big storms blowing up from the south. Sometimes, even if the weather seems fine, something will be happening way off, and then the surf will just be huge. I mean, some of the biggest waves I've ever seen have been around Cape Town. You just get these enormous sort of, 4-meter surf. And so the boats that they use for these pelagic trips are pretty small, and they end up canceling a lot of trips. And so I was basically signed up for 3 or 4 of these pelagic birding trips in Cape Town, and they all got canceled. And I was just getting more and more desperate to get out onto the deep waters and see some albatrosses and stuff. And finally, we sort of had the perfect day, perfect weather, almost flat ocean, which is very rare in that area. Got out to sea. We got just a few miles off the Cape Peninsula. I think you could still see the Cape Peninsula. And as you know, what you're trying to do out there is basically find a trawler, a fishing boat, because that's where all the birds are. There's a lot of, I guess, bycatch that they throw out, and then so sometimes you get thousands, even maybe tens of thousands of birds around these trawlers. And so we're basically steaming out to sea, and we're looking for trawlers. And I was standing on the bow. I hadn't seen much so far. A few cormorants and kelp gulls and some of this near-shore stuff. And at some point, we got out deep enough that I guess we were suddenly in albatross territory. And I was standing there on the bow, and out of nowhere came a black-browed albatross. And I guess it came up behind the boat, and it sort of shot up next to the boat, and it sort of banked right in front of me. And so this was the first, I guess I'd seen waved albatross, but this was my first sort of South Atlantic albatross.
Right.
And it was staggeringly awesome. It was almost, I almost could have touched the thing. It just banked right in front of me. And most people know albatrosses are huge. So black-browed albatross is actually relatively, I guess it's a medium-sized albatross. Yeah. So they're about 7 feet wingspan. So I'm sort of 6'1". So this thing is, as it pulls up in front of me, it's longer than me. The biggest one, wandering, is like 11 and 12 feet wingspan.
Up to 12 feet, I think.
Insanely huge.
It's ridiculous. Yeah.
But this thing was big enough. They have this sort of pale eye and yellow bill and just this sort of exquisite black and white plumage. They just always look immaculate, something about these black-browed albatrosses. It just pulled up in front of me, and it was one of my greatest birding moments ever. Just to finally get out to sea, to see this magnificent albatross that's longer than me, to sort of look it in the eye. I just, when you're at sea, I think you're always at this heightened state as well. Some of it is adrenaline, some of it's sort of anxiety. It's always pretty exciting to be on a boat. And then this albatross pulls up in front of me, and I just got this like surge of adrenaline. Tears came to my eyes, and it wasn't like, sadness. It was just like absolutely being blown away by just the magnificence of nature.
I think pelagic birding, almost more than any other type of birding, you have this uncertainty, or you have this feeling that you could see almost anything. It's just, you've got the whole ocean out there, and it could just, you never know what's going to produce. Could be some mega rarity, or you could have a terrible day, whatever. So it's always feels like that to me.
Definitely. People are on edge because they're worried about getting sick as well. I don't get very seasick, but that's always part of it too. You're just out, you're trying to stay
You're lucky. Stay
healthy. Yeah.
I did mention that it's my least favorite type of birding, and that's not because I've got anything against albatrosses or other seabirds. I'm just very prone to seasickness, and I've done maybe 3 or 4 proper pelagics, and I've just felt absolutely horrendous on every single one. I've always been throwing up over the edge, and even I've had lifers flying around me, and I've been laying on my back on the deck, and people saying, oh, albatross, and I lift my head up and I just look at what they're pointing at, and then I sort of lay back down again. So it's like really not, it's difficult to enjoy that kind of thing if you get so seasick.
A few things will just destroy your will to live, like seasickness, and I've never even been seriously seasick, but I've been close enough.
It's not even that you're not enjoying the birding anymore. It's that you're not enjoying being alive anymore. It's,
exactly.
You can see why people would probably sort of jump in the ocean just because you feel that bad, that horrendous. But I actually see albatrosses. I've seen probably half the albatrosses now, and I've seen a fair number of them from the coast, which is always nice. But every year in Japan, I do a sort of little mini. It's kind of a mini pelagic. It's a ferry crossing, so sort of maybe a 6-hour ferry crossing, and we see dozens, if not sometimes hundreds, of albatrosses of 3 species. But it's on a big ferry, and it's fairly stable, and I just about managed that. But yeah, these little day pelagics on a little fishing boat, just swaying backwards and forwards. It's just I just haven't found a way to do it yet.
It's tough. It's tough in Cape Town too. I mean, was an exceptionally calm one, but
yeah,
normally.
But sometimes you don't want it too calm, because you need a little bit of swell for the birds to get up and fly around, I guess.
That's right. Oh, I should mention that black-browed albatross is actually considered endangered now. A lot of the breeding colonies have been declining very quickly. I think the biggest one is on the Falklands. These birds are sort of all around the southern oceans. They fly thousands of miles a year. I think that's part of what's so special about albatrosses, is they just feel totally wild and unconstrained by humans in any way. They're just living in this totally different world in which you breed on the Falklands, and then you fly across the Atlantic, and then you're off of Cape Town for a while, and then you go. I mean, they're just the distances they cover and the way they're able to survive out in the open ocean is amazing to me. But I guess the big thing that has endangered them is long line fishing.
Yeah.
And basically they put out lines that are tens of miles long with thousands of hooks, and catch a lot of albatrosses as bycatch.
Yeah, it's very sad. Yeah, and it's one of the groups of birds that is really most threatened now. And it's a difficult, you've got to, because there's fishing boats from all over the world, so you need sort of international legislation, and you need to have it enforced, and it's not easy.
I know a lot of efforts have been made. People are aware of the problem, but it's sort of a tragedy of the commons situation. It's like, well, if you get 90% of the countries on board with this albatross treaty, and then 10% aren't, they're just going to take all the fish and kill all the albatrosses.
Okay, well, that's great. Actually, it's a nice bird. I've seen these quite a lot in South America and also in South Africa, and they are pretty cool birds. Okay, so we're going to move on to your number 1. This is the end of our top 10s, and it's going to end with a bang here. Very cool bird. It's a personal favorite of mine as well. The black woodpecker, which you saw in Spain, I believe.
That's right. So, big woodpeckers are just awesome. They have a certain mystique. Some of it has to do with the ivory bill. I grew up reading about the ivory bill, and at some point when I was a kid, I had a subscription to Birdwatcher's Digest magazine, which in those days it was just like a gold mine. Like, whoa, there was very few internet resources for birding, and didn't have a lot of contact in my early career as a birder with other birders. So whatever was in there was just so exciting. And I remember reading an article about looking for black woodpecker in Europe, and it was one of these nemesis bird type articles in which someone had looked for this thing for years. I think it was an American traveling to Europe, and just hadn't seen it over and over again, and had finally seen it. So I think this article just served to give this bird a special mystique in my mind. It's an awesome bird. It's a big black woodpecker. It really is virtually all black. I think males have a red cap. I think it's a little bit longer than pileated woodpecker, but it's shorter tailed. So it's actually a considerably bigger bird. It's like a bigger bodied bird. So it's quite a huge woodpecker. And yeah, all black. And it's pretty, you probably know more about this than I do, Charlie, but
I've only seen it once. Actually, females do have a little bit of red on the crown.
Okay.
The crown, sort of nape, yeah.
It strikes me as it has a huge range. It's found all the way from sort of northern Japan, Siberia, all the way to Spain. But it's pretty low density, pretty shy,
very low density,
pretty scarce, right?
So, I grew up in the UK, and it's only found on sort of continental Europe, and so I was always looking at the birds of Europe and looking at this bird that that I'd never seen. And I got to Europe a few times and birded around, and it was always on my radar, and I never saw it. And then I finally got it when I went to China.
Oh, really?
A few years ago, and I wasn't expecting it. And then
Sichuan.
In Sichuan.
Oh, really?
But it's a mega bird. We had it on a nest coming in. We got great views. So yeah, it's a very special bird. I've got quite a soft spot for woodpeckers in general.
Most people do. They're definitely just favorite birds. What kind of habitat is it in Sichuan? Is it like spruce fir?
High elevation pine forest, or coniferous forest.
So yeah, although it has a massive range, it's just a very scarce bird, very low density, and I think it's just quite shy. Pileated woodpeckers, they're awesome, but they
going to feeders and stuff. Yeah.
Sorry, Charlie. I think I'm going to have to wait. The baby's doing something here, and I'm afraid my mic's going to pick that up.
I'm sorry.
Oh no.
we call these cockapocalypse. It's hard. Can you say cockapocalypse? Good job.
We should definitely leave a little bit of that in the podcast.
Yeah, we should.
Especially where he says cockapocalypse. That was amazing. Oh, amazing. That's awesome.
Naked baby is just about to leave.
Let's go. Let's go put your paws.
Bye bye. Bye. Oh, he's getting good at talking now.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, so black woodpecker has this huge range, but it's pretty low density, pretty scarce, and it has quite a bit of mystique. It's one of, like with your story, it's one of these things where you could be in its range a lot of times and not see it.
Yeah.
And so I spent a few weeks in Spain, traveling around very cheaply. I think I mentioned that in an earlier podcast briefly, but I rented the cheapest car that I could and basically slept in my car for 5 weeks and camped a little bit, but mostly just slept in the car and birded. And this black woodpecker was one of the things I really wanted to see. I really didn't have any specific information about where to find it. So I did this epic hike up into the Pyrenees one day, and I had studied the vocalization of black woodpecker a little bit, so it was sort of on my radar. and I'm walking up these mountains. Beautiful place in the Pyrenees. This was November, so normally it would be quite cold and snowy, but it was just this kind of bizarrely perfect day where it felt almost like summer. And I'm walking along, and there's this beautiful kind of coniferous forest up to my left on the steep slope. And I hear what I'm almost certain is black woodpecker calling way up the slope. And I think you and I would both do exactly the same thing under these circumstances. Exactly what I did, which is basically sprint into the forest and head up that slope as fast as I possibly can. There was no hesitation. I had to see this bird. And I knew it was a pretty scarce thing. It wasn't like I was gonna just bump into a bunch more during the day. It was like there's one there, and I'm gonna see it. So I sprinted up this hillside. So I'm running through, and this was a steep. I mean, I'm tempted to say 45 degrees. Probably wasn't quite that steep, but it was a steep hill, and I'm just sprinting through the trees, trying not to fall down. And every few minutes I hear this call again. And I get there, and I get right near where the call was coming from. But I know I have to be a little bit cautious because it's quite a shy bird, and so I'm kind of creeping around these pine trees, looking carefully in front of me. So I'm creeping my way up this slope, and I'm looking carefully, and I hear a sound that birders dread, which is loud wing beats. And it sounds like this thing has just flown a mile. It's like,
right.
Well, there goes the black woodpecker, and I'm probably not going to see this thing again. Who knows where it is? I've just sprinted up this almost vertical slope. Like, my knees are burning, my legs are on fire. I can barely breathe. I'm kind of gasping for breath. And when I heard those wing beats, I sort of sunk to my knees and just tried to catch my breath. And I kind of hung my head, just, in exhaustion and disappointment, and caught my breath, closed my eyes, and I looked up, raised my head, and I looked up, and there was a black woodpecker about 10 feet from me on the side of a pine tree. It was like this miraculous vision. So I guess what happened was that there was probably a pair, and one of them flew off, and then one of them was like on the other side of the tree and just popped out. It was a little bit like, I think, your Royal St. Clody's story. It was, the agony and the ecstasy. Like, I'd gone from profound disappointment and exhaustion to absolute exhilaration and delight just within seconds. And I was on this slope, and so I was sort of on my knees, but I was almost just leaning into the slope, and then this woodpecker is just right in front of me at eye level. It was just a stunning view of this great bird.
Did it see you?
I don't think that it did, eh? At least not. I certainly had a good view for a couple minutes before it flew off.
Sometimes you tend to sort of photograph those moments in your mind that sort of imprinted on your mind. You probably have that. I'm sort of imagining what it's be like, but I mean, you must be able to actually see that image of this bird.
Absolutely. And this is actually one of the things that I wonder about with all the photography that we do these days. Would it be more set? So I didn't even have a camera in those days. I wasn't thinking about taking photos. I wasn't focused on taking pictures. I just looked at it and fully enjoyed that sighting. Now I do wish I had that picture, but then I might have actually enjoyed it less if I'd been snapping away with my camera.
You might have had an amazing view of it and then not got a good picture, and you would have been disappointed by
Exactly.
it. I often find that's what people do, and it's like you just see. I sometimes show people an amazing bird, and they see it really well, and then they don't get a good picture, and then they're all disappointed. And I was like, you just see one of the most amazing birds in the world. That should make you happy.
Yep, it's strange. You really have to kind of remind yourself of that. So I sometimes miss those pre-photography days, even though I get a lot of satisfaction from it, and looking through photos later is a way of kind of reliving a memory, and even having a different kind of experience with a bird. Sometimes you see things in photos that you miss in the field, which adds something to your enjoyment. But this black woodpecker was just a very pure, birding experience. I mean, I was unencumbered by gear. I had a backpack probably with a little bit of water and some cheese, and I had a binocular, and that allowed me to just sprint up that slope. If I'd had playback gear and recording gear and a GPS and a camera, I never would have been able to do that, and I probably wouldn't have even seen the thing. So I do like that kind of pure birding sometimes.
No, it's a very cool bird. It was a big target of mine. Several years ago. So that was really, really nice to see. I can definitely see how that would be in your top 10.
Yeah, I think in all these cases, it's more about the experience than the specific bird. It's a fantastic bird, and like you, I love woodpeckers too. But yeah, the specific circumstances, and it was just this kind of magical day up in the Pyrenees as well. I mean, I climbed up into the alpine tundra and just walked around for miles, and there was not a soul up there, and it was just a very special and memorable day for a lot of reasons. I might also add that the pileated woodpecker was one of my sort of spark birds, like when I first got into birding.
Right.
It's one of these things where I saw it on the field guide and I just couldn't believe. I thought maybe in some kind of remote wilderness I would find this bird. And then I ended up finding it in this kind of incredibly scruffy, destroyed woodlot just behind my house. And it just blew my mind. It was almost like finding a mountain lion in your backyard or something, It was just, I couldn't believe this creature lived in my backyard. And I found them in the fall when I first started birding. I mean, I was just infatuated with these woodpeckers. Like I would just go out every afternoon and find them and just watch them for hours. So that's part of why, black woodpecker is in some sense like the European equivalent.
No, it's it's a great story. I was just about to say, I haven't birded much in Spain, but it's really up there in my top places to visit. So especially at the moment, I can certainly fantasize about going and hiking about the mountains in the Pyrenees.
Yeah, well, you're going to absolutely love Spain whenever you make it there with speaking Spanish, and it's one of my favorite countries in the world. I'd love to live there.
Yeah, really. Wow. Cool. Okay. So that's it. We finished our top 10 birding experiences each. I think we'll mention in the notes. We'll remind people of our top 10. So if you want to let us know how many of those you've seen, that'll be pretty cool. But from next week we're gonna change things up a little bit, and we're gonna invite our first guest onto the show.
Our friend Keith Barnes. He's a South African, a world traveler. He lives in Taiwan now, and Keith has some of the best stories I've ever heard, and he's a great storyteller. So we're looking forward to getting a few good stories out of Keith. So I guess we'll leave folks with our natural sound for the week, which is going to be a drumming black woodpecker from central Germany.
Fantastic.
And this recording is from Zeno Canto, and it's by someone called Bertram. So thanks, Bertram.
Okay. So that's it. Enjoy the woodpecker, and we'll see you all next week.
See you next week.